Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Arkansas Children's. I'm Marcy Doderer, and I have the pleasure of serving as President and CEO of Arkansas Children's, and we are pleased to host the summit this morning. I think many of you know our mission is to make children better today and healthier tomorrow, and I can't think of a better topic for us all to be engaged in when we think about what a public health crisis we're all facing now with vaping and our children. And I'm pretty inspired by you look at the collection of minds who are here today. We've got healthcare and law enforcement, public policy, all sorts of people, education, coming together to try to address this really pressing issue for our Arkansas youth. A few statistics for you. The CDC has reported that 37% of 12th graders across the United States say they've vaped over the last year. In our state, the Arkansas Prevention Needs Assessment from 2018 found that 50% of Arkansas students in the 12th grade reported using e-cigarettes, alcohol, or both. 57.4% of those same 12th graders reported that e-cigarettes are very easy to attain, and that's a 4% increase from the 2017-18 school year to the 2018-19 school year. And while as a children's hospital we've only seen a handful of clinical cases arrive in our doors, we are truly concerned about what we can do to limit children's and teens' access to these devices. The Arkansas Children's Community Outreach Team works directly with youth statewide to educate students, teachers, and parents on the dangers of nicotine-based substances. Last year, our program partnered with 56 schools across the state and other youth groups, reaching thousands of students. Our own community health needs assessments showed the same kind of startling results. We did a phone survey of parents, and Arkansas parents are incredibly worried about their children using e-cigarettes. That phone survey asked parents what this meant to them, what dangers did they find in them. And the parents, 67% of the parents said that the use of these products, e-cigarettes, any number of those, Juuls, other vaping products, the off-brand, so to speak, product that's now available, 67% said that the use of this by children is a serious health concern to them. We at Arkansas Children's are also strong supporters of policies that improve health for Arkansas children and are pouring energy into collaborations that can help us better protect our kids, including summits like this one. There are currently 69,000 Arkansans under the age of 18 who are expected to die prematurely from smoking. There's only 700,000 kids in Arkansas to begin with, and if we're going to already estimate that 69,000 of them will have a premature death because of smoking, we've got to come to the table together. 1,400 kids in Arkansas are new smokers every year, and 33.5% of the cancer-related deaths in Arkansas are attributed to smoking. At Arkansas Children's, we strive daily to put children at the center of every decision that we make. And I hope that we can also be a guiding light for the thoughtful discourse and challenging responses that emerge from this summit. We're here to find ways to protect our children directly, where they live and where they learn and where they play. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Arkansas Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge. She is the 56th Attorney General of our state and the first woman to be elected to this role in the history of Arkansas. Attorney General has led a number of efforts to help protect our children in Arkansas, including fighting the excuse me, I'm having a hard time this morning. I think I need another cup of coffee. Opioid epidemic, teaching families internet safety, and combating domestic violence. So thank you, Attorney General, for helping to convene the summit, to being the voice here today. We look forward to moving in lockstep with you and the greater team for a healthier tomorrow for our children. Attorney General.
Well, thank you so much, Marcy, for your words, your leadership, and for hosting and opening up Children's Hall for us to convene today's Vaping Summit. A big shout out also to UAMS for the partnership with Arkansas Children's, UAMS, and the Attorney General's office to make sure that we are getting this information out, not just to you all, but out to the public at large. I believe Arkansas Children's is online streaming this, and we're going to make sure that when you all leave here today, the information you hear from these great panelists and speakers, that we're able to mass produce it to be able to share with schools, parents, others across the state over the coming months. As I've traveled to 75 counties. I do this every single year. Well, this year, as I've been traveling to all 75 counties, I have heard repeatedly from school administrators and parents about the increase in young people using vape products and using e-cigarettes. And time and again, we are asked, Leslie, what are we going to do about this problem? Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. And while I agree that there's not one size fits all solution to this epidemic, it's important that we all come together and hear about the dangers of e-cigarette use among our young people, but to also, at the end of the day, at the end of the summit, we'll hear about solutions from the schoolhouse to the state house. Some schools have taken dramatic action, some state houses have taken dramatic action, and we want to make sure that each of you have the information you need to take the sort of action necessary at your schools, at your workplace, and most importantly, at your homes. When I left today the house and I kissed my 15-month-old daughter goodbye for the day, I thought to myself, what will she be facing in 10 years, in 15 years? Because none of us could have imagined facing this epidemic 10 or 15 years ago. And as we talk to law enforcement, we learn that it's not just the nicotine products being contained in these vape pods. It's THC that we're hearing about on the national news, but we're beginning to see liquid methamphetamine and fentanyl being introduced. As folks were filtering in, I spoke to one lady, also named Leslie, and she had a heart-to-heart with her students. And as you all can imagine, and some of you all may know, those kids shared with her, oh, well, Juul it's kind of like Facebook. It's out. That's what the adults do. And so kids it's not just the Juul products. It's the made out of country, bought and sold online, being brought up and being brought into the United States and being handed out at schools and distributed with very little regulation. And that's what these kids are ingesting and putting directly into their lungs. Earlier, I announced that the Attorney General's office, have taken first steps in enforcement against those who are selling these products online, making it too accessible for young people. Today, I sent a letter to eBay warning them about selling these products online and to Arkansas youth. We also sent letters and enforcement advisories to 100 online retailers, making sure they understand that it is illegal to sell these products and to deliver these products to consumers in Arkansas. And I did not mince my words, and I won't mince them with you all here. I'm not known for that. If you sell products illegally to Arkansas youth, there will be consequences, and we must hold these retailers accountable. There has been too much misinformation and misleading advertising about e-cigarettes and their youth. And so that's what today is about, is getting over the hurdle of ignorance and getting information into adults' hands, into young people's hands, so that way we can overtake this problem before it takes Arkansas youth. We must replace fiction with facts. It is absolutely fiction to believe that ingesting a chemical into your lungs and into your body that you have no idea what those chemicals are is safe for you. And so today we're going to replace fiction with facts and to tell Generation Z that they need to be nic-free. Most of these kids would be absolutely astounded to learn that Juul is owned 35% by a cigarette maker. That these same people who make and sell market cigarettes are the same people who are selling their products and that are being used by people to get off of cigarettes. So we hope that parents across the state will be listening. We want to arm our educators with this information and our friends in the medical community. If you have friends that live in Northwest Arkansas and couldn't be here today, make sure to tell them that we're doing another Vape Summit on Wednesday of this week at Bentonville High School. So if you've got friends, family members that want to attend, please make sure they have that information. We've also launched a public service announcement today that will run statewide about the dangers of vaping. It'll be played at the end of this video that we're going to show you in just a moment. But again, a huge thank you to our partners, Arkansas Children's, UAMS, and everyone, all of our panelists who have come out, and every one of you for being here today and investing in Arkansas's children. God bless you all. God bless the state of Arkansas, and certainly God bless the United States of America. Here's this video. Thank you.
E-cigarettes, vape pens, Juuls. They're often marketed as safe alternatives to smoking, but their cool designs, fun flavors, and the fact that they're easy to hide means it's not only smokers who want them, it's kids. And for kids, they're definitely not safe. Teens should absolutely not use Juuls, e-cigarettes, or any similar products. Here's why. When kids use Juuls or other e-cigarettes, they're getting a big dose of nicotine. This disrupts their brain development. It changes the connections between brain cells, causing problems with learning, mood, and impulse control. It makes depression and anxiety worse.
And as any smoker can tell you, nicotine is highly addictive. That makes it very difficult to quit e-cigarettes. And vaping makes it much more likely that kids will smoke real cigarettes later. It's true that a few e-cigarette brands don't contain nicotine, but most of them do. And all of them contain other dangerous chemicals like these. Formaldehyde, which is found in glue and embalming fluid. Diacetyl, which causes lung disease. Benzene, that's a carcinogen linked to leukemia. Some tests have also found metal particles in the e-cigarette vapor. The devices themselves can also be unsafe. They can explode.
The long-term effects of using e-cigarettes are unknown.
And because there are no standards, we don't know the ingredients of these products.
We don't want children to take unnecessary risks with their health
And begin a lifelong addiction to nicotine.
Which is then inhaled into the lungs. Because vaping is relatively new, long-term research on how it impacts people's health is still ongoing. We do know that people who vape are choosing to inhale some pretty toxic chemicals in a way that hasn't been fully studied. Even though vaping products are marketed as a way to help quit smoking, data on their effectiveness is mixed. Because many contain high levels of nicotine, people are at risk of becoming more addicted. In fact, one study found that 63% of people who Juul didn't realize they were using nicotine at all. The bottom line, vaping may be promoted as being safer than smoking, but that doesn't mean it's safe.
Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, and you're watching the Rutledge Report. Young children and teens are using e-cigarettes and vapes because they believe it's safe, when in reality, it's not. And parents don't even know because vapes are easy to disguise and they don't stink. Kids, don't get neg sick and get the facts straight before you vape. The Attorney General's office, we will do the fighting for you. Call us at 800-482-8982 or visit arkansasag.gov.
I usually don't need a mic, but I think I might this time. All right. Good morning. I'm Julie Benefeld. I'm the Chief Deputy for your Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, and I am your MC for the day. Usually that just means that I tell you to turn off your cell phones, please, if you haven't done that already. And I also try to keep things on track and on time. But I also have the honor this morning of introducing this panel. We're excited about doctors on the dangers of vaping. Not only have they taken time out of their busy schedule to talk to you about this, but we're excited also because we didn't have to go out of state. We didn't have to look across the country to find experts on this subject. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad because of the seriousness of this subject, but we found these experts right here in Arkansas. And I think that says a lot about UAMS and Arkansas Children's. And I've already apologized to them saying, I'm not going to go through all of your credentials, your CV. I think you have a link to those in some of your materials because it's very impressive. We could spend all day on their background and what all they have done and their expertise. But I do want to mention just a few things about each of them. Chancellor Kim Patterson is the Chancellor of the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. He holds his MD as well as an MBA. He attended Emory University, graduating with honors. But as I read through his CV, what I noted was that he is a pioneer in all sorts of ways in the heart and vascular care. Think about what that gives him in this area of vaping. Dr. Margaret Kulik is a social epidemiologist. Did I pronounce that correctly? How about that? With more than a decade of experience in tobacco control research. She's the assistant professor in the UAMS College of Public Health and the Center for the Study of Tobacco. Dr. Tamara Perry is an associate professor of pediatrics and the division chief of allergy and immunology at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences and Arkansas Children's Hospital. She's also the medical director of telemedicine at Arkansas Children's and a researcher at Arkansas Children's Hospital Research Institute. Dr. Robbie Pesic is the associate professor of allergy and immunology for UAMS and Arkansas Children's. He is the medical director for the Allergy, Asthma, and EOS Gastrointestinal Disorder Clinic at Arkansas Children's. And Dr. Matthew Steliga is the associate professor of surgery at UAMS Winthrop P. Rockefeller Cancer Institute. He's the associate program director for the surgery residency training program at US and the chief of the division of thoracic surgery. His areas of clinical interest include minimally invasive surgery for lung cancer and other cancers in the chest. Can you imagine the expertise together at this table to talk about this very subject of vaping? I can't. I think it's wonderful. And our host for this panel is our own Dr. Greg Bledsoe. He will moderate this panel, and he has understands some really good questions for this panel. He is our Arkansas Surgeon General. He is the board certified emergency medicine physician. He has a master's in public health from Johns Hopkins University, as well as being an emergency medicine physician. In January of 2015, Dr. Bledsoe was appointed by Governor Asa Hutchinson to be the Surgeon General for the state of Arkansas. Would you all welcome Dr. Bledsoe as well as this entire panel? Sorry, using the microphone is also part of my duty.
Am I on? Can you guys hear me? Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to Arkansas Children's Hospital for hosting us. Thanks to the Attorney General for pulling all this together. This is a very important topic. And I'm so thankful and excited to have this panel here. As Julie was mentioning, it's really incredible. We have a small state, but we have such incredible resources in our healthcare professionals and the talent that UAMS and Children's Hospital and the other hospitals that are spread out throughout our state can bring to a topic like this, which is a really important topic. So I'm going to jump right in and start asking some questions to our panel, but I'd like to start with Dr. Patterson. Dr. Patterson is a cardiologist. He's also the Chancellor for UAMS, and I'd just like to start by asking him, what's your thinking about vaping, and what are you seeing and hearing about this topic, and what would you like to tell the audience today?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Greg, for moderating the session, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't also thank Attorney General Rutledge for convening today's event. She announced educational and enforcement efforts earlier this morning that we endorse and support in the very strongest possible terms. I want to thank Marcy Doder and the Children's Hospital team for hosting this event. And I think we need to thank those in our community who have led the efforts to raise awareness for the challenges with vaping. During the last legislative session, the Women's Caucus really brought this issue to the forefront. Senator Jim Hendren has spoken forcefully about this issue, and Governor Hutchinson is concerned that we have not educated ourselves well enough about this issue. So I'd like to begin by just dispelling some myths. And I think the first myth is that vaping is somehow a safe or safer alternative to cigarette smoking. And we simply do not know that that is the case. And there is all kinds of evidence to suggest that the chronic effects of vaping will be as bad or worse as the effects of smoking tobacco. And we have much to learn about this issue. Now, we do have safe alternatives to cigarette smoking. Nicotine products are highly regulated, their sales are restricted, and they have not contaminated our schools in the way that vaping has done. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that vaping is not simply a safer alternative to cigarette smoking. I think the other myth that we need to dispel is that there is regular vaping and there is black market vaping. The fact of the matter is that all vaping is unregulated, unapproved, and as far as I'm concerned, black market. You do not know what you are putting into your body when you are vaping. Now, let's imagine a couple of different worlds. Let's imagine a world in which, at that first moment, when we knew that cigarette smoking was likely to lead to lung cancer and emphysema, we did what we are doing now. And imagine how much better off our state would be if we had taken cigarette smoking as seriously as we are taking vaping right now. Now, I would also ask you to imagine a world 20 years from now in which we do nothing about vaping today. And imagine what that world will look like when a 12-year-old boy who starts vaping today is 32 years old and has been vaping for 20 years. Now, I had a conversation with my children last night. I've got an 8th grader, a 9th grader, and a 12th grader who are in Little Rock schools. And I used the word epidemic. And they said, what does that mean? What does that look like? Now, there are all kinds of epidemics that we have had, healthcare epidemics in the course of our history, influenza epidemics, we had an HIV epidemic. The epidemic that this is most likely to look like is polio. polio. Remember stories, you're young enough, that you didn't live through it, of entire wings of hospitals filled with polio-stricken individuals on iron lungs. 20 years from now, imagine a world in which we do nothing, and 12-year-olds now who've been vaping for 20 years are walking around on portable respirators because of the impact of vaping. If we do not act now, Greg, that's what we got.
That's a very good point. You know, it's really interesting to me. I talk to medical people quite a bit, but a lot of people might not know I'm also married. I have 3 daughters who are ages 8, 10, and 12. And so a lot of my on-the-ground medical information comes from them about what's happening in the schools and what's happening in the communities. And I was talking to them just recently about the vaping issue. And on their soccer teams, there's been some discussion about vaping, and the kids almost universally believe that when they are using a vaping device, they're just inhaling water, just heated water. It's just a little bit of flavoring, a little bit of water, and it's completely safe, it's harmless. That's, to me, one of the biggest issues that we need to deal with in educating about this vaping issue. You're not just inhaling superheated water with a little bit of flavoring, you're inhaling a lot of other things. I had an interesting conversation before we began with Dr. Stelga, and he's a thoracic surgeon who deals with lung cancer and the effects of smoking and tobacco, and we were talking about some of the chemicals and things that these chemicals were doing to people's bodies when they inhaled it with these vaping devices. So, Dr. Stelga, if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and what these chemicals are doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much. A lot of the word we hear from marketing or kids or other people is it's approved, FDA approved additives. These types of things are approved to be added to food, which is eaten and digested. They're not approved to be inhaled into the lungs. Furthermore, like when they're inhaled, it may be that these chemicals change properties as they're heated. We all know that chemicals can change when they're heated. And let's take that a step further. These chemicals that settle down in the lungs might not be cleared right away, and then they break down and degrade into other products. So we have the original product, which is an approved food additive that may go in the lungs, and it does go in the lungs. And then the heated byproducts of it, and then the breakdown products of it. And none of that is intended to go into the lungs. Those types of things can cause respiratory symptoms, pneumonia-like pictures, but it's not an infectious pneumonia. What we had thought was some of this may be related to oily substances that can accumulate in the lungs. A recent paper, a letter that came out to the New England Journal just last Wednesday, discussed that the pathologists or the doctors that look at microscope slides of lung biopsies from Mayo Clinic had seen 17 cases of vaping injuries. And it wasn't just a buildup of oily substances. What they saw was inflammation and injury and scarring in the lungs. So short-term injury and long-term injury in the lung tissues. And they likened it to chemical burns, things you'd see from an industrial accident when people inhaled toxic things they weren't supposed to. So when we think about what's being inhaled, it is really difficult or almost impossible to know what is inhaled from e-cigarettes because it's such a large category of many different liquids, and it's a constantly evolving technology. So I think we don't know exactly what it is, but what we do know looks pretty dangerous.
Thank you. So when we look at what's happening with our kids and the feedback that we're getting from not only kids but their parents and the way this is affecting our children, I'd like to get some feedback now from one of our pediatricians and Dr. Tamara Perry, who deals with a lot of kids and kids issues. What are you seeing in your practice, and what are you hearing from folks about the vaping issue? Are you getting a lot of questions about it, and what sort of things are you discussing with them?
Thank you, Greg. That's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, I'm not getting a lot of questions from parents. I think that is one of the issues that we really have to face, is that parents are oftentimes very unaware of what's actually going on with their children. One of the major problems with vaping or juuling is that it's very inconspicuous. I mean, people can do it and you won't know it. I mean, you can be in the same room with them and they can vape, or they can just go in the other, in another room close by, and your kids can be doing that right there in your home and you would never know it. And so if you're not directly asking the questions to your patients, if you're a provider, or to your children, if you're a parent, then you may not be aware of a problem that is really a serious problem. I think one of the very important things for us to know as parents is that Juul and other vaping products can contain up to the nicotine amount that is equal to 20 cigarettes. And if you have a child that's juuling or vaping one pod in one day, that's equivalent of smoking 20 cigarettes. And that's a huge problem that parents are not aware of. We have to ask directed questions of our kids, whether they're our biological children, or if we're providers, or teachers. Are you juuling? Are you vaping? Are you using e-cigarettes? You need to know the language. You can't ask them generic questions, are you smoking? Because they don't really think of juuling or vaping as smoking. They don't think that it's nicotine, so they don't feel like that they're tobacco, they're exposed to the tobacco. So you really have to ask those specific questions. And unfortunately, parents are not asking a lot of questions, so we have to bring it up. We have to raise it as a public health issue.
That's a great point. So regarding the research, Dr. Kulik, I'm going to hand this one over to you. Tell us about what's going on and what you're seeing from a research perspective with this issue.
Thank you for the question. Yes, for example, e-cigarettes are marketed as devices that help you quit. However, as was already mentioned here before, really the evidence is very mixed. In a very controlled environment, in a randomized controlled trial, it has been shown that e-cigarettes could be as effective as nicotine replacement therapy. However, this is not how e-cigarettes are used, not on the population level, because in that randomized controlled trial, these people were guided through the process and they wanted to quit. And so really you should be using nicotine replacement therapy. And then even if it shows that the e-cigarettes were helpful in this one situation, we have to look at whether people actually quit vaping after they quit smoking, because what often happens is that people who really want to quit smoking, they start vaping and they end up using both products, which actually adds to the risk, because then you're inhaling the toxicants from vaping and also from smoking. So really it's not helpful. So if this happens, you really have to urge people to stop both, because life as we see it and people who use e-cigarettes, that's not a randomized controlled trial.
That's a good point. What about you, Dr. Pesek? What are you seeing in the work that you're doing, and the type of problems, and what would you tell the audience today?
So I think as a pediatrician, I focus on what's going on in kids, and I think there are several specific issues. I think you've got developing lungs, not mature lungs. So you have higher risk when you use any type of inhalational product. You're more likely to have a lung injury, and on top of it, if you have asthma or another lung disease, that puts you at higher risk of exacerbations of that disease. So it's kind of a double whammy. You not only have the potential risk of vaping, but you also have the risk of flaring up diseases that you already have. What's also concerning, I think, in children is you can consider vaping as a gateway drug. It was mentioned in the piece earlier that it typically will lead to use of other tobacco products. So children middle school and up are 4 times at higher risk of using another tobacco product. And over 10% of kids in high school will use multiple tobacco products as a result of vaping. So you have kind of both of those issues. You have a behavioral problem and then you have the issues in developing lungs.
That's a great point. You know, the other thing that's interesting when I've been looking at some of the research regarding vaping is the high doses of the nicotine that's being delivered in these vaping devices. Dr. Perry mentioned this already. Sometimes some of these vaping devices will give you enough nicotine as the same amount as 20 cigarettes, which is an incredible amount. And people always ask, well, what's the problem? Well, the problem with that is that especially in young people, their brain is still developing. And what you're doing is you're remodulating and you're rewiring the brain with those high doses of nicotine to make them more prone to nicotine addiction as adults, but also more prone to other addictions as they move forward. So before a person is 25 years old, their brain is still remodeling, and any of those substances that they're being exposed to is going to cause a lot of problems down the road. So it's a big issue. Let's see. I've got a whole list of other interesting questions here. We've talked a little bit about the devices and their use as smoking cessation devices, but a lot of people are starting to use these technologies and putting other things into the substances. We've seen increased reports of people using THC or cannabis, other types of illicit substances, sometimes just other substances that they think might be interesting to superheat and breathe in. Who would like to, anyone want to comment about some of the other things that they're seeing or maybe have read about in the research that are being used in these devices in an illicit way that could be causing problems? I'll just throw it out there. Go ahead.
So I think the THC is probably one of the biggest things, and that in flavoring as well. If you look at reports of the lung damage, probably 75% of those are related to THC used through a vaping device, which is even more unregulated. And so, it could be the THC, it could be the other chemicals that are in there, but those are particularly dangerous to use. Plus the flavoring issue, which seems to also introduce other chemicals, causing a higher risk of lung damage.
That's a great point. Speaking of the flavoring, one of the initiatives that's been rolled out in other states and that public health officials have been discussing is the banning of certain types of flavoring. Anyone want to comment about that? It's an interesting thing. I mean, no one wants to get involved in free market sort of debates, but on an issue that's this important, when you have flavoring that's being seen as very attractive to pediatric kids, it seems like something that would be potential public health intervention that would be a good way to go. Ahead, Dr. Stelga.
Yeah, I think that the goal is to get fewer people sick and more people healthy. We've got to think, do these flavors appeal to smokers who can't quit any other way, and are they safe? Since there's so many different types of flavoring agents made, innumerable number, that I think it's difficult to tell if they are safe. Some of them are clearly marketed towards kids. Cotton candy, gummy bear. I've even heard of a Lucky Charms cereal flavor. I mean, clearly this is not the demographic that ends up in my cancer clinic after smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 30 or 40 years. So I really question the intent of some of those flavors and also the safety of them. If we look at medications to treat a problem, they don't come in flavors. I mean, except for pediatrics. We have, bubblegum flavored amoxicillin or cherry flavored cough syrup. We have different things to help kids, but if we're treating adults, targeting adults, trying to treat a problem, I don't see flavors as a necessary ingredient in there. And so if it's not necessary, and then there's so many questions about what those products are, what they turn into, what they break down into, I really wonder about the value and the risk-benefit.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yes.
Dr. Kulik.
Can I add to what Dr. Selinger was saying? Yes, there is ample research showing that it's really the flavors that attract kids, because whoever is smoking cigarettes as an adult, well, they are used to tobacco flavor. So sure, they'll be saying that it's nice to have something else that isn't tobacco flavor, but all the research, when you ask kids, one of the main answers that they give why they tried it is that the flavors were so appealing. And I believe the latest count that it keeps increasing is that there are 15,000 different flavors.
Wow. Very interesting. And of course, as the panelists have mentioned, a lot of these flavorings, it's the superheating of these flavorings that cause a lot of the problems because we don't know exactly what's in it and the chemicals. All right, let's see. So I'd like to get back to Dr. Perry. Dr. Perry, you were talking about not getting a lot of questions from the family members of your patients. What are some of the things, if you have a young person and you're worried about them vaping, or you're worried about the influence of peers that are vaping, what are some of the things that parents can do to intervene? I know you touched on this, but could you go into that a little bit more deeply?
I think asking direct questions, not beating around the bush, but ask those direct questions. Are you using, and list the products. I mean, we have to educate ourselves about the names of these products, as well as the slang that the kids are using. But we also have to be really careful not to do it in a way that will make them feel like you're blaming them, because I really feel like a lot of what we're seeing is these children are victims of marketing, and they feel like, or felt like when they started, that it was completely innocent. They were just, vaping some flavors, or, it was appealing to them because of the flavoring, and they oftentimes don't realize the harmful chemicals or nicotine content of the things that they're vaping. So we have to inform them that, it's not their fault that they tried it or that they were enticed by it, but that we want to help them, and we want to inform them of the dangers, because we don't want to see those health consequences that Dr. Patterson pointed out 20 or 10 or 5 years from now. We don't know what consequences we'll see with our children.
That's a good point. It's interesting, these devices are being marketed as smoking cessation devices. So to take people out of a smoking habit or off of an addiction of cigarettes. Dr. Pezik mentioned in his testimony, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about this. You said that it's actually can be the other way around. They can be gateway drugs to other things. So that's something that when you say that to people who are big fans of these devices, they get really upset and they say, well, no, this is actually helping people. Could you touch a little bit more about that and what you've seen?
Sure, I think you have to look at two different types of people. You've got to look at people who are already smokers and people who are not smokers. And I think that in people who are already smokers, there's some potential benefits in that there can be less nicotine content, there can theoretically be less chemicals in it than a cigarette. And some studies show that they can have patients who are smokers can have a little bit of improvement in lung function when going to vaping. But then if you look at people who have never smoked, there really is no benefit. I mean, there's nothing but harm. So I do understand where people who already smoke could see that it feels an attack. They're trying to do something better. As we talked about, it doesn't really seem to be advertised as a way to really transition off of tobacco products. It's just another tobacco product, sometimes really no different. And then again, we're marketing directly to people who have never smoked, and they have a huge risk of not only starting, but doing other products as well.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that? I saw a lot of nodding heads, but that's okay. We'll keep moving. It's interesting. I spoke to some media not long ago about this issue, and a great metaphor that my colleague Dr. Bala gave me was people ask, they say, isn't this better for you than cigarettes? Isn't this better than tobacco? And I think to Dr. Pezik's point, what Dr. Bala will often say is it's like being asked, is it better for me to jump out of a 3rd-story window or a 10th-story window? They're both going to hurt you and probably kill you, whether you're jumping out of the 3rd-story window or the 10th-story window. And so for someone who is smoking 2-3 packs of cigarettes a day, switching to vaping technologies and vaping products, there could be some benefit, although it's still bad for you. But if you're not smoking, and a lot of the marketing is directed towards young people with these flavors who aren't smoking, and it's being marketed as a natural, safe, healthy product, if you're not smoking, there can be tremendous risk and tremendous problems in that. So thanks, Dr. Bala, for that metaphor. I think it's a really good one. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I think that this is safer or not, dialogue
is something that is being inflicted upon us by the people who are selling this. State Senator Missy Urban said something that I think really resonated with me. You know, if this was cooking oil, and we have people dying the way that they are dying from vaping, it would be off the market yesterday. You know, if this was an unsafe car, the cars would be recalled. So the safe versus, safer thing, we're just playing into the hands of the people who are making money on the backs of our young kids.
It's a good point. Okay, let's see here. I got a list of questions. Are there things that if you're a medical person, if you're a nurse, a school nurse, physician, someone who's dealing with patients, are there things that you should be looking for doing differently in your clinical exam or in your interview, talking to your patients, to try to pick up on this being a problem? I think a lot of people are concerned that maybe they have patients and they suspect something's going on, but they're not absolutely certain. Well, what recommendation would you guys give to clinicians?
Every single week, a couple times a week, in clinic, we see patients come in, and we've changed our dialogue to do you use tobacco products to do you use tobacco products, meaning any kind of smoking, any kind of chew tobacco, any types of e-cigarettes or other devices. And then when we get that information, we take it a step further and make a plan to get the patients off the addictive substances. So do you think that we have to broaden our language because patients don't think of themselves as smoking, much like kids won't think of themselves as smoking? And we have to help people who may be addicted to vaping to get off of that with approved pharmacotherapy, approved medications. Nicotine patches and gum are very safe and effective. And actually, patches and gum can be used together and they work well. Other medications we have, obviously, we've got great quit programs. And we have looked for vaping now in all of our patients the same way that we check for tobacco use on every encounter when we check it.
I would also add that as parents and providers, we need to look for signs of nicotine addiction because many times patients will display those symptoms of jitteriness, forgetfulness. Those are things that as a parent or provider you should ask about and you should also pay attention to because again, you may not know that your child is vaping, but you may be able to discern if they are having symptoms that are unusual, or if they have some personality changes, or they seem overly anxious or jittery, because nicotine addiction is one of the major problems, acute problems that we can see with vaping.
And it's everywhere. The most recent surveys show that almost half of high school seniors in Arkansas have used vaping products at some point in the past, which is an astounding percentage if you think about that. One of the questions that we have is regarding cancer. I know there's been a lot of discussion. Obviously, tobacco, cigarettes is a direct link to cancer, and we've done a lot of work in educating the public, educating people about the risk of tobacco and cigarettes regarding cancer. There are people who come up to me and they say, well, yeah, Greg, but I'm trying to get onto these vaping products because I've been told they don't cause cancer. Does anyone want to weigh in on that? Because that's a common theme I'm hearing.
Absolutely. When we look at a treatment or device or a medication or anything, we have to think of every aspect, every facet of it. There's been some really good toxicology studies done on electronic cigarettes measuring carcinogens that we know. And yes, there's actually less concentration, doesn't mean none, but there's less concentration of carcinogens in the e-cigarette aerosol than there is in a cigarette. That sounds good, but that's not the whole picture because there's other diseases from these devices. The cigarette manufacturing process evolved from the Industrial Revolution. The cigarette rolling machine was patented in the late 1800s and mass-produced. we didn't gather enough data and have enough convincing reports and enough strength of everything until a Surgeon General's report in 1964 that trend in smoking was going up and up and up finally started coming down. So it takes decades and decades of damage to find that. And cancer is a very long lag time. Even if e-cigarettes are shown to have less carcinogens, that doesn't mean they're safe for respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, pulmonary fibrosis, or lung scarring. It doesn't mean they're safe. And we don't have decades of data on a relatively new product. So people do tell me, yes, they have less cancer-causing substances. I say, that's great. But there's worse other substances that might cause other diseases.
Yeah, so is putting my cardiologist hat on, it would be remiss of me not to jump on Dr. Seligy's comment about cardiovascular consequences. Tar and the carcinogens in smokable cigarettes are not what is the link between smoking and heart disease. And smoking is the #1 cause of early onset heart disease in our country. And it's the nicotine in tobacco that causes early onset heart disease. Nicotine is a powerful, very powerful vasoconstrictor. That means it causes your blood vessels to contract and reduce blood flow to organs like your heart. And we don't have long-term data on e-cigarettes, but there's no reason to anticipate anything other than them being just as bad for your heart as smoking tobacco is. And add to that the idea that you're not having an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old now starting smoking. You're being exposed to very high concentrations of nicotine in your adolescence, and the only logical conclusion is that the situation from a cardiovascular perspective is going to be even worse.
That's a good point.
And may I also
Yes,
add that
sure.
the incidence of lung disease that we are seeing now, which I guess started in the end of August, it's not really new because it's not some sudden onset that happened. It's that it had reached a critical mass, so it got counted because before that people didn't really know to ask those questions when patients presented to them with certain symptoms. They just thought it was some strange kind of pneumonia. So just to say that this is not some sudden disease that might be linked to one particular ingredient that was really causing it. This has been going on for quite a while. There are case reports of patients presenting with symptoms like that, I think as far back as 2012.
Wow. So I think one of the take-home points that we can say with confidence is it's probably not good for you to superheat chemicals of any type and inhale them into your lungs. So if you're taking notes, write that down, and you can take that to the bank, okay? So no superheating chemicals and breathing them into your lungs. All right, so another question that comes up frequently is, well, a lot of these problems that we're seeing with the vaping devices is because people are tampering with them and they're adding all these other substances. If you use the vaping devices like they're supposed to, if you're just following the directions and you're just using the normal stuff, then it's okay. We don't see the lung problems, we don't see the stuff. Is that really true? Who wants to take that? I know we've touched on that, but just to be very overt in the discussion.
A lot of the reports we're seeing in the literature and even some we're seeing clinically, like we heard, a high percent, 60, 70% may have THC or CBD oil or other additives that are put in there, but not all. There are cases where it's nicotine-only devices that are leading to illnesses. So since there's such a wide array of devices, liquids, and the technology is constantly evolving, it's hard to say for any certainty that it's due to those illicit substances only. We're seeing it in patients who use just the nicotine too.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think it's important that we don't conflate
these very acute, accelerated cases that are coming to light now with the long-term consequences of this, and assuming that these two things are collinear. In my mind, you know, the acute severe cases that are now being reported are you know, potentially a very accelerated form of the chronic changes that happen in patients over periods of time. But they're not one and the same. And just because some of these acute cases occurred in individuals who are ingesting THC-loaded e-cigarettes doesn't mean at all that the long-term consequences of vaping anything are benign.
I'd also like to add that the other problem with vaping, even if you use the devices as they're intended to be used, there's a risk of injury, acute injury related to using e-cigarettes. There have been reports of patients who've been burned, even children who've been burned, or who have had explosions of those devices that have disfigured them for life. So that is a really serious consequence of using a device as it's intended to be used.
That's a good point. Is my mic still on? So one of the things that's been really interesting, I think my mic is off, but I'm just going to speak loudly. One of the things that's interesting is I get a lot of people who come up to me and they say, well, Greg, what about CBD and some of these other things? And this has been touched on. I think Dr. Patterson made a comment. You know, a lot of the things that are being put into these devices are not FDA approved. And it's important for people to realize that things like CBD, things like these other substances are regulated like supplements and not like pharmaceuticals. So even if these things are sold at a pharmacy, you walk into a pharmacy and you purchase your prescription or whatever, the pills or the things that you're buying from the pharmacist have gone through a rigorous program to make sure that not only they're safe for you, but the dose that you're receiving is appropriate and safe for you. If you're buying a supplement, what we're finding is when we take these supplements off the shelf and we run tests on them, these things are oftentimes the substance that they're supposed to have in there, they don't even have it in the substance that they're testing. But sometimes the dose of that chemical is either super high or super low, and so you don't really know what you're getting. Would anyone else like to comment on that?
I think we do have to be careful with supplements because just like with e-cigarettes, there's this inherent belief that they're safe because they're over the counter, they're a supplement, they're not a medication, and they don't have potential side effects. And that's definitely not true. There's numerous reports and examples of products that were considered safe at one point that have been pulled off the shelf because they weren't safe. And I think here it's the exact same thing. A flavoring or something that is considered natural is not always safe and without harm. It sometimes interacts with other medications, and so it's simply something we have to take seriously.
Okay, great. Let me see. We're sort of nearing the end now of the questions that we've been given, and so I just wanted to kind of turn it back to each of the panelists. Two things. Number one, what would you say to the audience in your kind of closing comments if you were going to wrap everything up? And then the other thing is that what would you say to retailers in the state of Arkansas who sell these products? What sort of feedback would you want to give them? And who wants to go first? No one. I'll tell you what. No one wants to go first. So who wants to go second?
I'm sitting at the end, so I'll go first. To take on the first part of your question, overall message. We've talked a lot about preventing things, educating people about the harms of it. These are harmful things, they're addictive things, we don't know enough about it. But in addition, I want people to know that there are kids out there who haven't been prevented, who are using this. There's adults out there who are using this and they can't quit. There are proven, safe, effective ways to get people to quit e-cigarettes, just like we have help them quit smoking. 1-800-QUIT-NOW is our state quit line through the Department of Health. It's fantastic. UAMS has our Freedom from Smoking group, numbers on the back of that pamphlet. The Truth Initiative has online, really neat text-based support, even for youth. The Truth Initiative is an online organization, you can search it. So I want people to know that we talk a lot about preventing it, the harms, educating, but for those who are struggling to quit, there's help out there that's proven and safe. What would I say to retailers about it? I understand it's a business. I understand that there's money to be made. There's many large industries that have gone tobacco-free and nicotine-free. But Target hasn't sold cigarettes in over 20 years. CVS dropped cigarettes. As far as vaping devices, Walmart recently stopped it. And large companies can do this and still maintain good business practices. Smaller industries, where a lot of their business hinges on selling this, I worry about the long-term safety, the effectiveness. There's FDA regulations coming down the road. I think it's not a strong, sustainable business because of all the things that are looming from all the things that we're learning.
That's a good point. Dr. Peasant?
I think one thing I had that was not touched on would be secondhand smoke. I think
That's
that's
good.
probably also considered safe by a lot of people. There are studies that show you can still measure nicotine levels in secondhand smoke exposure from vaping. So even for people around you, it's not safe. For retailers, as a pediatrician, I would say we have to look out for the health and well-being of children, and we cannot advertise to them at all. And if there's even a potential chance that that's going on, then we have to stop it.
So this is a really hard but easy question. I'm, in addition to a physician, I'm the mother of 3 teenagers. So I would say to the retailers, the manufacturers, to stop marketing these products to my children, period.
In terms of what can be done, yes, I also understand that it's a business that people make their living off of, but there are states like, for example, Michigan or Massachusetts that have recently banned the sale of flavored e-cigarettes or just any type of e-cigarette until the companies actually apply for pre-market authorization and get approved by the FDA. So that would be a sensible step.
That's right. Then Dr. Patterson.
I think that the question of sales of e-cigarettes is, an issue that frequently evokes, well, shouldn't people be allowed to make the choices that they want to make? And I get that, but the cost of the damage due to vaping and e-cigarettes is a cost that will be borne by everybody in this room. And I think we all have to ask ourselves, is the damage that is inflicted on our country, our state, our kids, and the cost that we will incur, is that worth it, or is this frankly blood money? What would I tell the people in this audience? I would simply say that the idea of heating up nicotine and breathing it into your lungs as being a safer way of ingesting nicotine is like saying freebasing is a safer way of doing cocaine. It just doesn't make any sense. I look around this room and I see the diverse factions of our state who are represented here. And again, I salute Attorney General Rutledge for her educational and enforcement actions that she announced today. We need that. I see members of our law enforcement here who I'm sure are going to be supportive of her efforts. Our school teachers, they are first responders in many ways in this epidemic, and we need to work together with you. Our healthcare providers are the ones who are going to come up with solutions both to head off, identify, and unfortunately treat
some of the consequences of this. I see members of our state legislature who are here, and I hope that we can revisit soon the legislative discussions that were started in the last legislative session by the Women's Caucus. We all will have to work together, but if we don't, the outcome is bleak.
Well, thanks to our panel. Let's give these folks a round of applause. So thanks everyone for your attention. Thanks again to Attorney General Rutledge for bringing this together and for Children's Hospital hosting. I think we're going to take a quick break, but, oh, excuse me, not yet. Stay in your seats. All right, thank you guys.
You all so much. Very interesting. Unfortunately, as time goes on, I'm concerned that you all will have more stories to tell about our young people. But hopefully we can get out and do more education as the Attorney General is doing, and the stories may not be as many as we're afraid of, but I will tell you that I learned a lot, things that I would never have even thought of, as you doctors have talked about this morning. All right, our next presenter is our State Drug Director, Kirk Lane, and again, in the interest of time, I will not read his entire history because, Director, you seem to have been around forever. Oh, I'm sorry. As have I. Some 30 years ago, I remember as a deputy prosecutor, he had been around longer than I have. He already had a reputation as a deputy sheriff as well. So I don't know what that says, but anyway, he's been around longer than I have. He was appointed as the state drug director by Governor Asa Hutchinson in 2017. He had begun his law enforcement career in 1982. Is that right? Wow, how about that? In 86, he went to work for the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office and was there for 22 years, rising to the rank of captain. And then in 2009, he retired from there and went to the was appointed chief of police of the Benton Police Department until his retirement in 2017 when he became our drug director. He is going to talk this morning for a few minutes about toxic THC in vape pods and devices. Director? You need this.
Good morning, and I'm proud and honored to be here today, and thank you to Children's and especially to the AG for putting this together, a much needed forum on what we're doing. But I want to start with a strong statement, and I'm inspired by Dr. Patterson and the other experts up there. But Dr. Patterson said, look forward 20 years. Look forward to what our children and our next generation are going to endure and what we're at. But I would say, look at right now. Look at what our children are enduring right now, that we're learning from overdose and the opioid epidemic, a suicide that's integrated in with the hopelessness and helplessness that drug addiction takes us. And right now in the United States, for the last 3 years, the lifespan for a United States citizen, male or female, has been declining since the early 1900s. We are declining with all the technology and all the experience that we have in our nation. We are moving lifespan backwards. So now combine that with vaping, the THC, the mixture of chemicals and poisons that we're putting into our bodies for profit. We're headed for a disaster. So we look forward to vaping and THC in the combination of this. And recently, on October 1st, they tell us that there's over 1,000 lung injuries that have been documented. So they seem to be coming very quickly, because very quickly we are starting to ask the the right questions about what's going on and starting to pull that data in. It's not that anybody's trying to develop a conspiracy, it's just that we're asking the right questions and starting to put together the pieces of the puzzle. And you look at the 18 deaths and confirmed in 15 states, and then we're looking at the mixture of THC in that. But it becomes very evident that it's not always about the THC, it's just the object of vaping. And we analyzed that data that we have on there, and that we show that 70% of the patients are male. The median patient's age is 23 years of age, and that's the median of what we're looking at. We look at the recent study in Arkansas where they did a 100 survey, what they call the 100 survey, and we look at the volume of high school seniors that are vaping, and you look at the disturbing percentage that's in there, one of the highest in the nation, as I understand. Kansas has come out with a tremendous vape-free schools toolkit. It's very in-depth. It's not something that we can just change the name out of, but it's actually in partnerships with what they're doing throughout their tobacco cessation program, a lot of things. And we really need to look at this toolkit as a guide, and in my opinion, maybe redevelop this kit to make it ours on what is going on in Arkansas, especially in light of the testimony that we heard earlier. That valued information right here at home is a plus to that.
This is an x-ray of a patient's lungs. And here's an x-ray of those same lungs just 5 days later. See all that light gray? That's fluid, which filled their lungs because of a life-threatening lung disease, linked to vaping. For years, vaping has been touted as a safer alternative to smoking cigarettes. But now, some vaping products are killing people. So what's going on? And is it really bad for you? Vaping typically refers to inhaling an aerosol, which contains either nicotine, in the case of e-cigarettes, or some form of cannabis, such as the psychoactive chemical THC. And in the last few years, it has exploded in popularity, especially among teens. I mean, just look at this graph. It shows the percent of high school students who use e-cigarettes. In 2018, it was over 20%. And that's what makes this news so scary.
A patient died from a severe respiratory illness, and it could be the country's first vaping-related death.
That was in August of 2019. And by early September, the number of reported deaths linked to vaping had climbed to at least 6. Not to mention, there were at least 450 possible lung injuries tied to both THC and nicotine vape pens.
I have been saying this from the beginning. Looks like it's becoming an epidemic.
That's Dr. Melody Prasad, who's treated at least 2 patients with what she calls vaping-associated lung injury.
So over here we are seeing our 18-year-old patient who, when he first presented to the emergency room with chest pain, fever, coughing, and vomiting. And as you see over here, it is the black is for the lungs, and you see nice still black.
But 5 days later, his lungs were filled with fluid because of inflammation, which she said was linked to vaping THC.
Once you come to this point, the chance of dying can be as high as 70%.
So what's causing all that inflammation? All of these lung injuries? The short answer is, we don't really know. Doctors say it's likely not the nicotine or THC itself, but rather other chemicals inside the liquid which get vaporized when you inhale. One possible culprit is vitamin E acetate, which health officials have found inside many vape pens that have been linked to the recent string of lung injuries.
When you start inhaling oils, any type of oil, vitamin E is an oil. Any type of oil, if you start to inhale to your lungs, you are going to create problem inside your alveoli.
Alveoli are small bubbles inside your lungs that transfer oxygen into your blood. And she says that vitamin E could interfere with the lining that surrounds them called pulmonary surfactant. But according to Dr. Mikhail Kazachkov,
I don't think vitamin E is the only guilty, substance here.
Because when it comes to vape pens,
you will inhale dozens of other substances. are not necessarily advertised, but they are there. There is definitely needs to be a carrier, vehicle, because nicotine cannot be delivered just in a pure form.
Until researchers find out what's behind vaping-associated lung injuries, the CDC says don't vape. But here's the thing. Lung injuries, they're actually not the only risk associated with vaping. One small study, for example, found that kids who used e-cigarettes might be exposed to higher levels of nicotine than those who used traditional cigarettes.
It would not be unusual to have extremely extraordinarily high concentration of nicotine in vape.
And
nicotine is not benign.
It raises your blood pressure, which can increase the risk of having a heart attack. And if you're a teen,
it is known to cause problems with the brain development.
Not to mention, it's highly addictive. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't vaping still better for you than smoking? But the answer isn't so simple. You see, smoking is really bad. It kills more than 480,000 Americans each year. And vaporizers, they typically contain fewer toxic chemicals than the 7,000 or so found in cigarettes. But at least in the short term,
there's absolutely no reason to say that vaping is healthier than smoking. In my opinion, vaping is worse because we are scared. We don't know what to do.
So if nothing else, there's probably a better alternative to smoking than vaping. And if you're not already a smoker, you definitely should not start vaping now.
It is at this point very clear that vaping is not only unhealthy, but it is very dangerous. This is not anymore a debate. This is a proven fact that vaping is killing people.
So let's move forward and kind of looking at THC, and we mix THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana that gets you high. There's set state regulations of the amount of THC that can be in different things. And so you see where we're looking at the regulations that are in place in Arkansas, and there's very little regulations, or in places where we have regulations and we can't even test for the percentage in our state crime lab or even in our health department. E-cigarettes are, like the doctor said, it's about heating a liquid that contains a substance in it, whether it be nicotine, THC, methamphetamine, whatever that person gets into that cartridge is what we're seeing, and then breathing that into your lungs in a vapor, in a liquid vapor, and your lungs are not designed to accept that. And so these are some of the devices that we seized. These were seized in Benton last week, as I understand. The cartridges on the right, as you can see, the cartridges on the top and the vaping devices on the bottom. It's what's known as a 510 vaping cartridge. So remember, they're superheating this. It's not like smoking something through a glass pipe or through a pipe or in a roll, a joint with combustible cannabis in it. It's superheated. And so when it's superheated, a lot of what you're heating up is the device itself. So the metals and finishes and things like that all come into your system at the same time. And you can notice, I don't want to make a remark, on the bottom side you see the little triangular, that's a California compliant device. But let's look at California. 1 in 3 marijuana shops or cannabis shops or medical marijuana shops in California are compliant under state regulations. With California being one of the strictest regulation states that we have, they can only control about 1 out of 3 marijuana shops that are out there. And so you have a real difficulty there. I understand from my relatives that live in California, you have to pay 20 cents for a plastic bag at the grocery store. Yet they're allowing this poison to go out there because they don't have enough enforcement to regulate it. Here's another device going along the same thing again, the California compliance sticker on there. These are being sold on the street right now for $40 to $50 a package or a vape cartridge, and that's what's out there. Another example of the vape pod that you would screw into the device, as you can see it there. All different kinds of flavors and tricky names and things like that. And let's talk about flavors. We talked about flavors that attract kids, but the other thing is when you're smoking THC marijuana, it masks the smell of it. So you can be standing next to somebody that would probably know the difference of what marijuana smelled like with a law enforcement officer, a teacher, or professional, and you wouldn't know it. All you would smell is the flavor. The other thing is that in a recent study that NIDA did, is that a lot of people that are smoking this don't really realize that they're smoking nicotine or THC. They realize that they're smoking the flavor. And so it's that deception on there that leads people down this path to think that it's okay to do and that it's not harmful. So I took this from a slide out of California. We looked at the marijuana that we experienced growing up, 3.9% THC. Colorado leaf today is around 19.6% THC, and then you go to your concentrates at 68.6% and higher. Some of the cartridges of THC that we're examining here in Arkansas are as high into the 90 percentile THC content. So you think about that, 3.9 all the way up to 90%, or even at the low at 68.6. My law enforcement fellows tell me that it takes 6 to 10 grams of marijuana, high concentrated marijuana, the Colorado leaf, the medical marijuana that we're seeing, to make 1 gram of the concentrate of what they're smoking in this substance. So that is the purity and the power of that substance in there. So this is a carton that came actually shipped through internet service into Benton, Arkansas, that they recovered last week. You can see it's a nice, pleasant looking cartridge. 30 premium vape cartridges, all of them in the 90 percentile range. And this is the back of it. And this is, you really have to analyze the back of this, because this is the nutritional facts that they put on there. And you can see the different birthday cake and the different type of strains of marijuana that was used in there. So one of the things I did is I wanted to know what kind of flavors are there, and I began Googling what I call through the doper science pages is on the page, not the science that we had here behind the table, but the science of the self-imposed people that are out there putting this in. And starting to look at this, and I went to a source called WikiLeaf, okay? Not WikiLeaks, it's WikiLeaf. And they asked me on there very quickly, are you over 18 years of age? Of course I am, and I pushed yes, and I went right through it. I pushed no, and I still went through it. So the safeguard, is not really there. But if you look at this and you look down at those bottom lines, percent daily THC values are based on expert stoner diet. Your daily values may be higher or lower depending on how big of a pothead you are. Smoking bad weed is bad for your health. And again, the California compliance sticker that's on there showing that. And this was on a box that was marketed through the internet. And this is what's coming into our state. They recovered 3 of these boxes in their case. So in New York, they passed on December 23rd a way to ban all flavored vaping in New York. And they were one of the leading states that went through it. And it's a very lengthy document. But you can see what's going on very rapidly and very quickly in our country. The governor spoke on there, and this was his statement. Kids are showing up in our emergency rooms with the lungs of 70-year-olds. In Massachusetts, they passed a governor's declaration of emergency, and this was to stop the sale of all vape products for the next 4 months until our scientists that we depend on, local, FDA, CDC, that we depend on to give us good answers, and this was vaping across the board, and it really makes sense. CDC tells us, recommends that you consider refraining from the use of e-cigarettes, vaping products, and particularly those that contain THC. And the CDC is who we turn to in times of despair, in times of science that's needed to solve problems, especially when life is in jeopardy. Just Friday, the FDA came out with a recommendation that says, do not use vaping products that contain THC. Do not use vaping products, particularly those containing THC, obtained off the street or from other illicit or social sources. And more importantly, no vaping product has been approved by the FDA for therapeutic uses or authorized for the marketing by the FDA. The agency recommends that contacting your healthcare provider for more information and the use of THC to treat medical conditions. In our state, right now, on the medical marijuana law, it says it encourages medical marijuana providers who provided by a recommendation from a healthcare provider to encourages the use of vaping of THC. We need to find a way to change that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Director. Now we're going to take a 15-minute break. Let me encourage you, if you did not sign in, maybe if you came in through the back, the sign-in table, it's very important to us to know who is here. The sign-in table is out this door. If you please will do that during the break, and we will come back and we will hear our last panel. So our next panel, our second panel, is Vaping Solutions from Schoolhouse to State House. I like that. And on this panel, we have Representative Dr. Lee Johnson. And so I said, what's your specialty? He said, well, it's emergency medicine, but you just say anything about me you want to, which we know is pretty dangerous if you know anything about me at all. He is serving his first term in the Arkansas House. He represents District 75, which is Sebastian and Crawford counties. Michael Byrd is the Assistant Superintendent at Cabot Public Schools. And if you look at his bio, he has a degree in biology with a certification to teach, but he has coached a lot. And he has gone from coaching and teaching into administration. And so he has dealt a lot, as we all know, with children at all stages of their school education, which will come in handy in this discussion. And then we have Deputy Attorney General Chuck Harder. He is a Deputy Attorney General for Public Protection for the Office of Attorney General. And quickly, I want to tell you what public protection does, because it does a lot. That public protection consists of 4 divisions at the office. It's consumer protection, consumer utilities rate advocacy, the environmental division, as well as the tobacco division, which is very important division of the office. And then on the end down there, we have School Resource Officer Deputy Jennifer Tarvin. She is a deputy in the Saline County Sheriff's Office, as well as the School Resource Officer at the Bauxite School District, and she has 16 years of law enforcement background. I think you will see also that on this panel as well, we have Arkansans with a lot of knowledge about the experience from schoolhouse to state house, and the moderator of this panel is our own Attorney General Leslie Rutledge.
All right. Well, thank you, Julie, for that introduction, for introducing today's panel. As we've all noted and are experiencing, this crisis just came on like a tsunami. And that's why we thought it was important to bring together panelists talking about solutions, whether it's solutions at our schools or possible solutions to the law. But none of us have a silver bullet to stop this crisis. It's going to take all of us working together and hearing from the schools what may be working at one of these schools may work at yours, if you're a school administrator, or laws that we've seen being passed or implemented in other states. It may be something that we've considered, but we also wanted to have our state legislator, who's also, as Julie noted in his bio, a member of the medical community, talking about that. This is not a crisis, and I don't think any crisis is, where I'm interested or you all are interested in who noticed the crisis first. You know, who cares? It's here. It's impacting our children. it's impacting our future. And so with that, I'm just going to throw some questions out. So thank you all. But if it, you know, some of our questions are going to be geared to our school administrators. Some will be geared to what we're doing on the enforcement front, the AG's office, or what can be done even more. So, particularly to our schools, are you seeing e-cigarettes in your schools? I feel like this is a rhetorical question. Are you seeing them being used in the schools? What are you seeing? Kind of briefly describe for us, and maybe we'll start, Michael, with you, and then go to Jennifer.
Sure, absolutely. Attorney General, first of all, I want to say thank you for hosting this. I think it's long overdue. I know 3 years ago, I could not have told you what a dab pen was, or a Juul, or anything like that. And now we've been slapped upside the head, it feels like, with this epidemic with our kids. And you listen to the statistics, we're looking at 50% of our kids trying this stuff. And so, yeah, it's there. It's there. And so the question is now, what are we going to do about that? And I think Dr. Perry really hit it home whenever she mentioned earlier, she's not being asked these questions. She is not being asked. And so I think that the education piece that our community and our parents need to know, they don't understand, the teachers, the administrators that are in the buildings every day that see what we're dealing with. The community at large has no idea, in my opinion. And so that's why I think this is, the message that you're sending out is great. And so thank you for doing that.
And I just want to ask real quick, because you're with the Cabot schools. How many students do you all have in Cabot schools?
Currently, Cabot Schools has 10,342.
So, larger than the town I grew up in, the number of students that you all work with on a daily basis. What's the youngest kid, or maybe, you know, how prevalent is it that you have teachers coming to you?
So I think I mentioned to you at a roundtable discussion several weeks ago, we have students as young as 10 years old that have dealt with this, 5th graders. And I can speak a little bit more about that as we move forward, or I can do that now. Our school board has really been proactive in the things that they're doing by looking at what kind of education pieces can we put in place for these kids. We have a drug resistance program. We've had that for the last several years. But as part of that, we've tweaked that this year so that now we're spending several weeks just on vaping and what the dangers of that are. So I can't wait to take some of this information back with me and share that with the educators that are writing that curriculum for our kids. And that's just something we do for all of our 5th graders. Another thing that our school board has done, and they're kind of their foresight for this education piece, is we saw it last year where we had students as young as 5th grade that were dabbling in this with the vape pens and the jewelry. So we thought, what can we do? We have an alternative learning structure through a conversion charter school. So we were not able last year to accept students who were in 5th or 6th grade. But we did some tweaking to that, applied to DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, in order to move that program down to 5th and 6th grade students. So now when we see a student that is involved in this a certain number of times, we actually remove that student from the school environment and send them to an alternative education, which is just for 5th and 6th graders. And it's used to give them counseling on decision making, to educate them about the dangers of what they're participating in, but also that removal from campus gives us some time to find out what's going on in their lives and maybe even help the family make better decisions as well. So that's one of the things that our school board put in place for this school year.
Fantastic. Next, Jennifer is a deputy of Saline County Sheriff's Office, but she also serves as a school resource officer with the Bauxite schools. And talk to us about what you're seeing.
Our school district has 1,700 students, and I'm the school resource officer for the elementary school, middle school, and high school. And it's prevalent in our high school. Last week, our high school assistant principal and myself spent all day Wednesday. When I say all day, I mean from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3:30 that afternoon, and all we did was deal with students who were vaping. And we suspended 8 students, and it is so prevalent that these kids just are not understanding the dangers, and they're just, you know, they want to tell you, oh no, I'm not vaping. Yeah, you are. We're catching you. And what they're saying is, well, it's just flavored vapor. And what's so frustrating for us is when we're catching them, we're getting blueberry, watermelon crush, and we got one student who had sweetened cereal milk. Tell me they're not vaping, or tell me they're not directly marketing to our children. I don't know a Marlboro cigarette that's tasting like sweetened cigarette, or sweetened cereal milk. I mean, these cigarettes taste like tobacco. These vapes are directly being marketed to our kids, and that's what's so frustrating, is they're thinking they're just vaping flavors, and they're not. And my job is to really, develop a rapport with these kids. I'm not there just to be a law enforcement officer at our schools. I'm there to develop a relationship with them, and I'm asking them, the school gives the punishment. First offense is 3-day out-of-school suspension, and I'm so grateful that I've got an administration that backs this up, and a school board that understands how important and how dangerous vaping is. Once the punishment is dealt out, I just talk to them. I'm like, where are you getting these things? eBay, Amazon. Well, is there, are you checking that you're over 21? No, and they'll pull it up and just start typing. These things look like mermaid tails with all pretty colors. They're geared to our kids, and that's what's so frustrating. And I'm asking these children, are you addicted to nicotine? Or are you doing it to be cool? I'm just doing it to be cool to fit in. So there's two different discussions we need to be having with our children. What makes you think that you have to do this to be cool? And then on the other aspect is when they do say, I'm addicted to nicotine, okay, the other avenue that we need to take is, what do we need to do to help these children get off nicotine?
And Jennifer, we were visiting before the panel, and probably something that struck me during that conversation was, as you're notifying parents that their child has been suspended, what's the reaction of those parents?
I'm in there when the parents are getting notified, and some of them laugh, like, you're really suspending my kids because they're vaping. They're not taking it serious either. These parents don't think that this is a problem. And we need to educate parents just as much as we need to educate the students. The counselor notified me, Red Ribbon Week, it's coming up. We need to educate on drugs and nicotine and vaping. It all goes hand in hand. Education is the key of vaping.
But it really struck me, and I think many of you all have heard that, because adults don't appreciate the dangers. They're beginning to, but when parents are not engaged in any aspect, but particularly in the disciplinary actions that our school administrators are taking with regard to their child, and they're laughing at them. As I sit down at these roundtable discussions all over the state, every school administrator says yes. Parents will say, I can't believe you took my kid's vape. Or, that's my property. Parents are mad because you've taken their property from their child who has it illegally at school grounds. Are you all seeing that at the Cabot schools as well? And talk to us about the challenges, maybe some of the conversations you've had with parents, and if you've had some solutions, with the solutions or the conversations, the dialogue with the students and the parents that's working. How do you talk to kids about this that actually works?
Certainly, so I'll speak to that first. Yeah, of course, we have parents that come in and say, that's mine, I'm the one that paid for it, I gave it to them so they wouldn't be smoking cigarettes. We've had that happen before. We've been lucky enough in Lonoke County to partner with the prosecuting attorney's office starting last April, so that we are now, it's part of our handbook and has been for years, that we make a report to a legal authority on offense number 1, along with the suspension. Ours is 3 days of physical suspension, and the tobacco cessation program they have to complete during that 3 days of physical suspension. So as part of that, though, we've always been in our handbook that we make a legal referral, but until this past March or April, nothing ever came of that. There was never anything done with it other than we told an officer or SRO or whoever it was that, hey, this student had cigarettes on them or they had a vape. That changed in last March or last April. Now those students are now receiving citations on their first offense. And Chuck Graham's office has done a fantastic job partnering with us and actually seeing those through so that these kids and these parents actually end up in front of the judge with a court date so that there are consequences and they're seeing that it is a lot bigger deal than just the school official calling and telling, hey, we're keeping your date. And now we turn that over to the police. They've been cited for it. That goes to the police department.
That's great. Jennifer?
We also take them, and when the discussion comes up, that's mine, our response is, not anymore. It's mine. You brought it on the school grounds, it's against the rules, it's against the law. So they don't get it back. And unfortunately, we're not as lucky we don't get to charge them yet. Hopefully that will come soon. And right now it's, you're 3 days out of school suspension. And hopefully we'll see that come in the future that we get to charge them, because I've noticed that when you charge a student, the parents end up paying, and it's a little bit more inconvenient, and they start to pay attention when you hit them in the pocketbook. So maybe they'll start paying a little bit more attention. And unfortunately, a lot of times we see with parents, it's the school's problem, and it's our problem, and it's not their problem. Maybe now if we make it their problem, they'll pay attention a little bit more.
Some of the language and lingo, as many of us are not quite as young as we would like to be. But we're just not. And so unless you have teenagers or 10-year-olds, or unless you work with them, how do you talk to these kids? Talking to teenagers and cops are two of my most difficult audiences, because they both kind of give you that one group's paying attention, one group's not. But they kind of give you that, oh, I got to sit here and listen to this look on their face. And so connecting with teenagers, connecting with young people can be very difficult and challenging. Are there some signs in the bathrooms? I had the opportunity to speak at a high school last week. It was actually my alma mater. And so when I used the ladies' room, I noticed there was a sign in the bathroom, and it really struck me, because we don't have these kind of signs at the AG's office. But we may have to start. But the sign said, "Can you believe some students actually come in here to put crap into their bodies?" I was a little surprised it was at a school, because I'm kind of from the old school where that language would not be acceptable. And now that I have a 15-month-old who repeats everything I say, or tries to, I'm watching my language closer. Are there things, lingo, things that we need to be aware of that you all can, or wisdom you can impart, or signs that you've seen that have been effective maybe, and that kids are talking about it at least to open up the conversation?
You have to talk to kids in the way kids are going to understand. And you have to talk their language. And they have the attention span of a gnat. I mean, let's just be honest. I work with kids all day, every day, in between kindergarten to senior high. And it just depends on, how you want them to listen to you. And ask them honestly. Kids are honest with you. I mean, if you want an honest answer, ask an honest question. And, when their disciplinary actions are handed out, I just ask them, where'd you get it? What are you doing? What flavors do you like? Who gave it to you? They'll tell you. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you. And we're finding them is not the most pleasant places that they hide them. Use your imagination. Can you imagine where they're hiding these things at school? Think about it. And then, we're asking, y'all are sharing these in the bathroom, okay? They're sharing them in the bathroom. Yes, I see the look on some of y'all's faces right now. They're not hiding them in their pockets. Girls, where do you think you're hiding? Boys, where do you think they're hiding? So, I'm telling them, y'all are sharing these with each other. You don't know what's in them. You don't. And I'm asking them, whose were you hitting? And they're like, I don't know. They were just in the bathroom. Okay, well, do you know where they were hiding it? No. So, when you tell them where they were hiding it, they have this look on their face of, oh my word. Yeah. when you tell them that, you're speaking in their language, and it gives it a whole new meaning. That's how you have to talk to kids. If you can't sugarcoat things with them. You can't talk in our language because they don't get it. They don't understand it. I ordered SAMHSA pamphlets, anti-marijuana, anti-vaping, anti-drugs, anti-steroids, anti-opioids. We've got these things everywhere. I mean, our school district is wonderful. They let me hand out things in their folders. They let us post them in the bathroom. They put them in their emails. Wherever you can get it in a kid's hand, get it. I mean, they're techie. Kids are techie. Kids aren't gonna, read the newspaper, but they're gonna read their cell phones. So get it where you can get it. But you're just gonna have to talk to them in their language. Whatever it is, however it is, it's gonna make some people very uncomfortable. You're gonna have to get over that. We're grown. Get to their level. Talk to them in their own language.
Michael, anything to add on
Sure,
that?
I'll just add this. I think one of the things that has helped us in the school community is people are talking about this now, at least at some level, whether it's the CDC or whoever putting out these stories of people getting sick or having injury coming from them. 2 years ago, we had an ambulance show up at Cabot High School. It was because a kid, we weren't exactly sure what was going on, but it was reported to us by friends that they were Nick sick. We never heard that before. What is Nick sick? Well, that's what the kids call it, being Nick sick. And then we talk about the number of cigarettes, 20 in a pod, that can be ingested. Somebody can do that almost immediately. That's what that was. It was the amount of nicotine that had gone into the student's body and caused a horrible reaction for them that we had to call an ambulance for that. And we had no idea what Nick sick was, but it's part of their lingo. It's part of what they talk. And that's the hard part, even for teachers and administrators. I see a lot of shaking heads out there, is that things change so fast for us. And you're on the front lines every day. You see it. You're dealing with it in your classrooms and in your schools. But sometimes it's hard for us to even know what the new thing is. What's the new dab pen, or what is the new pod with THC? It's unbelievable.
And if you all saw in the PSA that we are releasing today, I used the phrase Nick sick, and it came directly from hearing from you talk about that. Of course, my staff thought I was so cool that I'd come up with this. And now I've got to admit, I totally stole it from you. Thanks a lot. All right, well, we're moving on then. We're going to shift gears now and visit with Dr. Johnson and talk to us as what you're seeing as a doctor, but also as a legislator. Some of the ideas that you and your colleagues in the State House are throwing out there, what you're seeing with other states, and maybe some ideas of what we need to do here. But really, I want your perspective as a doctor and a lawmaker.
So a doctor's a lot easier. Now listen, you talk about Nick sick, and as an emergency medicine physician, you're on the front lines of seeing what some of these products are doing to some of our youth, and not just our youth, but also our adult population. And so, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I would be participating on a panel like this today, I would have promised you I would have been on the first panel, talking about the dangers of nicotine and nicotine abuse, and specifically now these e-cigarettes and vaping. It's easy for me as a physician to stand here and tout the dangers that I think we all see. The harder challenge is putting on that legislative hat and trying to figure out, how do we motivate legislative change that's productive. And I think the first step to that is you got to get the legislators excited about change. And the way to do that, I can tell you after coming out of my first session, is phone calls, emails. I'll tell a funny story. So I was a champion of the Tobacco 21 legislation, which we got passed this last session, which was great. And during that time frame, I was also pressing the issue of e-cigarette tax. And if you went to the Vapor World website, during the legislative session, there was a window to tap. So tap here to buy e-cigarette tax. And so you tapped it, and it went straight to my name and cell phone number. So I can tell you that cell phone calls, emails, those things work. So I do want to echo what Mr. Byrd was saying and say thank you for raising awareness to this issue. I think the beginning of legislative change starts with increasing public awareness, and I would encourage you in the audience to reach out to your legislators. It is an effective way to create change. So On the legislative front, as far as ways we can try to improve the situation, I think of legislative initiatives in three general categories. One is we've got to prevent people from starting. So legislative agendas that work towards preventing our youth from entering the market. So things like, banning the flavored products. These are the things that kids are reaching for. When you have sweet cereal, anyone who's had Cheerios with peaches and sugar, you know what sweet cereal milk tastes like, and that's the kind of product that they're pushing these kids. So we have to do things about the flavor. I think it's important also, the education component of this is really important. When I look back at my youth, one of the most impressionable things I remember is in 5th grade science class, Miss Fields coming in with a lung tissue, right, that had been smoker's lung. And probably all of us at some point had that experience. And that she even had a little machine that you would pull up and down and you could artificially smoke a cigarette. You could see the lung getting filthy from the cigarette. That made a big impression on me. And I think you have to start that young. As you're saying, by the time these kids are in middle school, it's already done. So we have to get out there in the elementary ranks. So whatever we can do legislatively to try to support those education initiatives like what you're trying to do there at Cabot, I think that's really important for us as a body. I think also on the prevention front, looking at how these things are advertised, trying to limit how we advertise them, that's important. And then accessibility is another key. So when I mentioned Tobacco 21, one of the two most sensitive points with regard to reducing accessibility in our youth, one is the age. So moving the age to 21 is a big deal. Once you start moving it past 20 to 21, your middle school kids, they know 18-year-olds that will go buy it for them. They don't know too many college kids that will go down to the store and purchase it for them. So this is a big deal that we're doing in our state. And we're one of the first states to jump in on that. I feel real proud that we've been out in front of that initiative as opposed to following it behind. Price point is the other sensitivity. So when you start looking at raising price point, these kids, if their parents aren't buying it, then these kids are going to have to buy it themselves. And so we need to be looking at how we tax this. Currently, there are only 10 states that tax e-cigarettes in any form. We're not one of them. And my opinion is we need to be. We need to be looking at how we tax that, and not just, it's important not just to tax it, but again, how we tax it. So I think those things are important. And then I think it's important not to lose track of cessation. So when you look at legislation to support cessation, because when you look at these kids are nicotine addicts. They are. I mean, at 18, if they've been doing it since they were 13 years old, and as you mentioned, one of these little jewel pods has the same amount of nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes. We know from our medical research that the youth brain is much more susceptible. They're making nicotine receptors at this age, and so as you're feeding them this nicotine, they're going to be more prone to become addicts as they move along. So we have to be sensitive to that as well. Anything we can do to support cessation is going to help our teenagers as well.
So as a legislator, and I know you encourage folks to call legislators, and I think that needs to be two of the takeaways today is one, talk to kids, two, talk to our lawmakers and make sure they're hearing from you. But as a legislator, do you care where the information comes from? I mean, you want to hear information, and whether or not it's, and I know during the legislative session, because a lot of people have been asking, Leslie, why is this just now coming up? Why didn't you all address it during the legislative session? This wasn't a new thing, and so, but it's sort of hit a fever pitch almost over the summer with school officials. What was going on during the legislative session, and where were you all getting information? And a number of legislators are acutely aware of this issue and have been out front speaking about it.
The schools were the driving force during the session. I think it built through the session. I think we had T21 was a big deal in the session. We had discussions about e-cigarette tax. All of that was topical, and most of the information I think we were getting from feedback from our school boards, our school superintendents. I think, unfortunately, it's unfortunate that it takes people having bad health outcomes and death to get us to the point where it gets our attention. And I think what's drawn most of this attention that we're seeing today is we're seeing kids die from using these products. And so, I think moving into the next legislative session, because we've had this bad outcome that we're all looking at now, you're going to see legislators more motivated to try try to make some changes. To your point too about where the ideas come from, and I try to say this in any venue that I'm at where I'm talking to people, you know, how people come up with, how we as legislators come up with ideas for bills. So there's really just three ways. I think of an idea on my own, and I'm not that smart to think of all the solutions.
Says the doctor.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing is an agency or an association brings us a bill. And then the third thing are constituent-driven bills, and that's you. And so I can't have all the good ideas. We can't have all the good ideas, but there are plenty of people that we run into every day who are thinking about these things, who have expertise in areas that we don't. We need you feeding us ideas for legislative change. I need you feeding me ideas for legislative change. We have a lot of resources within at our fingertips with the BLR to try to create legislation, but we need better information filtered to us. And I think all of us as legislators would welcome that.
Well, what an excellent point. And I often tell people, and you all know this, how we've got people from across Arkansas here, and we'll have people from the Northwest Quadrant on Wednesday part of the summit. Little Rock doesn't have all the answers. And so we need great ideas that are being implemented or initiated from across the state being brought to us and brought to our lawmakers to make sure that we can have that sort of positive impact on state level. I'm going to shift gears again because Chuck Harder, who's the Deputy at Public Protection, it's kind of like when I played sports growing up. And my parents, when they coached the teams, have any of you all ever played sports for your parents? Okay. Seldom, if ever, do you get hit the ball to practice. You never get to play. And so, because Chuck works at the Attorney General's office, he's last. But, so we're so proud of Chuck and the work that he and his team do in our public protection. So, Chuck, why don't you visit about some of the tools that we have in our toolkit in terms of education and enforcement, and particularly on the enforcement front.
Well, General, first, thank you for letting me have this opportunity to be on this panel and for your leadership in this area. First, sales of tobacco and alcohol to minors is illegal. That's black and white. Black and white. Sales are illegal. So what has tobacco evolved into? It used to just be cigarettes, but it's now evolved into it's illegal to sell cigarettes, vape products, e-liquids, anything that's an alternative nicotine product, as well as cigarette papers and the cartridges that are used for the vape. That's all illegal. That's fairly somewhat straightforward when an individual walks into a retail store, a tobacco superstore, or some other establishment here in the state of Arkansas. They take your ID. You can't buy a beer at Kroger without an ID. You can't go into a tobacco superstore and buy cigarettes or a vape product without an ID. And those IDs will help verify that that person is old enough to buy that product. You know, and those IDs have evolved over time. I grew up in an age where there was no picture on the ID, and if I had somebody that I reasonably matched their physical description, I could go buy beer. But now there's photo IDs, and there's even the information contained on an ID that verifies that individual is who they say they are and they're the right age to buy the product. There's a big complication when it's online sales. The world is moving towards online sales. I haven't gotten a Christmas present for my son from anywhere from Amazon for the last 5 years. And so that's where they go to buy these things. So how does the age verification process work there? Well, it's a lot more complicated because you don't have that face-to-face. You can't verify that individual is the one buying the product. And so there has to be certain protections put in place. One is, what's your date of birth? And it can't just be, as Director Lane indicated earlier, it's are you over 21 or under 21? You got to go more than that. What's your date of birth? Give me some valid ID. Give me your driver's license number or the last 6 on your social. Because there's a database out there that's going to match up my name, that date of birth, and that. What's the address? Where are you shipping it to? And it has to be, the shipping address and the billing address need to be the same. It's a red flag if those are 2 different addresses. And that address hopefully can be tied back to the database. What's your method of payment? Gift cards. Gift cards should not be a valid way of making a payment. Those are anonymous. It has to be something with somebody's name on that, and it needs to be the name of the purchaser and not daddy's credit card or some other credit card. So there has to be checks in there so that you're not selling online to people who are minors. Arkansas has a belt and suspenders approach to this, particularly when it goes to online sales. You cannot sell or deliver tobacco products to Arkansans. That's the belt and suspenders. So even if there are some states where online sales to adults are okay, but you can't in Arkansas. So the belts and suspenders is you can't have a shipping address that comes to Arkansas. So that's another piece of enforcement. The other piece that we're looking for is to stop bulk sales. You know, roughly about 20% of the product that finds its way in the hands of kids is from the minor themselves purchasing it. 80% comes from they get it from somebody else. So there needs to be processes in place that stop the bulk sales of the product that we know are going to then turn around and be sold in the black market or otherwise distributed to children. Those are important pieces. The other piece in terms of the enforcement, besides this absolute ban on sale to minors, is not to engage in false, deceptive, or unconscionable trade practices. And so what does that mean? What that means is that you market your product to youth. You market your product to youth and you target youth. You use social influencers to market your product, people who are heroes to the young people, those who's out marketing your product. You use the media that they use. You use social media, you use Twitter, Facebook, well, I'm sorry, Twitter and Facebook are my generation, but whatever they use now, you stop them from being able to use the social media. So that is a false and deceptive trade practice that has got to stop. Another thing that has to stop is the marketing strategies and the campaigns that market to these kids, and the sales of devices that have no other useful purpose than for children. A person, if these products are truly smoking cessation devices, smokers want something that looks and smells, or looks and tastes like a cigarette. They want something that's a tobacco flavored or a menthol flavor. They want it to look like a cigarette. They're not looking for something shaped like a USB device. They're not looking for bubble gum or donut flavor. The marketing of these flavors is a false and deceptive practice that has got to stop. These are some of the things that have to occur for us to be able to address this problem from an enforcement standpoint. And you know, one of the things that we've done in general that you started today is to go after the third-party platforms. That is how they get around valid age verification processes. An online seller will say, I've got an age verification process. You cannot buy from my website. But they also sell on eBay where there is no age verification process. And we want to stop that, and that's why the General has reached out to eBay. The other thing that there are a number of websites, we've identified 100 that do not indicate that they will not ship to Arkansas. You have got to put on your website, do not ship to Arkansas. You do not ship to Arkansas any of these products. And so those went out today, and we will continue to follow this enforcement so that working with educators in the healthcare community, we can address this issue.
Thank you, Chuck. I think that's too many adults don't fully appreciate that it's illegal for these companies to ship to them in Arkansas, or don't think of it in the same terms as illegal to provide a product that's prohibited to a teenager, you being the person to give it to them. And so raising this sort of awareness is key with what we're doing today. As we're beginning to wrap up, I want to go back and perhaps some additional thoughts. You're talking about social influencing. Yes, if someone is trying to reach young people by Facebook, Twitter, a record player, we got to update. We've got to update that information, and so make sure, and that's why I'm going to go back to our school officials one more time. Maybe some last thoughts as we're wrapping up. If you had to say to this crowd, maybe each one of you all think about, a couple of minutes worth. What is the biggest takeaway that this audience can go back to their kids that they work with, their kids that they live with, the adults that they interact with, and friends and siblings, aunts, uncles who are saying, oh no, it's fine. At least I'm not smoking. What do we say to those people? What has been the most effective, or what do you think the biggest takeaway is, or even from listening to the doctors today? I think all of us had some holy cow moments listening to the physician speak. And so I'm going to start with you all, and then we'll work our way back through the panel and give some closing thoughts.
Certainly. I think the biggest takeaway for me was from the medical panel and hearing, and I was ignorant. I didn't know that it's not regulated whatsoever. These may be FDA-approved products for foods or things like that, but they're not for inhalants. And so for me, that was the takeaway. And so I would ask everybody that's here today, you need to be talking to your neighbors and your friends and your kids and the people that you see in your community about what we're talking about today and educate them. Help them understand the dangers and how real this is and how big a problem it is.
I was going to say the same thing. Was the FDA non-approval, or they're approved for food consumption, not inhalation. And communication. Guys, our kids are listening. They're soaking up everything we do, we say. If we're doing it, and we're telling them not to do it, and they're like, well, you're doing it. Why can't I do it? It's the same thing. You know, guys, we've got to talk to our kids. Prime example. I'm in the office with some of our athletes who we caught vaping. And I said, do you know who Tom Brady is? Well, yeah. Who doesn't know who Tom Brady is? I said, what do they call him? The GOAT. Y'all don't know what that means. It's greatest of all time. We have to speak their language. Again, I keep going back to speak their language. What interests them? What are they doing? And I said, what makes him the greatest of all time? Because he's the best. Why is he the best at what he does? Because he watches everything he does, everything he eats, everything he puts into his body. Do you think Tom Brady vapes? No. Do you think he smokes? No. Well, if you want to be the best athlete you can be, you can't put this in your body. You can't do these things. So, again, we have to talk to these kids. We have to talk to our neighbors. We have to talk to our family. They're listening to us. We've got to get their attention some way, somehow. Whatever our kids are into, we need to know what our kids are into. We need to know what's going to grab their attention and talk to them on that level.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Everybody wants to say the same thing.
Well, that's
Public awareness is a big deal. And when we talk about, we mentioned a lot about the youth, we're here for the youth, but making sure parents and adults are aware, specifically the danger. I mean, I think this myth that this is not a dangerous product, I think we're starting to overcome that. I think we're seeing that we don't know. We don't know what, even in the products that are regulated, we don't know what these heavy metals do long term to your body that we're consuming. We don't know what this propylene glycol is going to do long term when you're inhaling it. But the bigger message that I think gets missed sometimes is the accessibility through the black market. I mean, when you look at the deaths that have occurred, most of these, the majority have occurred through people obtaining these pods through the black market. But you can get on the internet. You have to be, I think there's a generationally, and certainly I'm part of this older generation now, who doesn't realize how easy it is for these teenagers to get on the internet and purchase whatever they want. And not just nicotine, but really more dangerously the THC products that they're getting. And they can get them and they can hook them right up to their Juul device, and we have no idea what's in them. And they need to understand that as well, that this is a really serious problem, that you're really rolling the dice when you take something off the internet and just put it in a pod and start smoking it. And I think making sure that parents and adults are aware that this is a pathway for these kids to get this, and if you think your kid's not able to do that, then you need to pay a little more attention.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Chuck?
Our office has been reaching out to the healthcare community, the educators, to try and understand the problem and to identify where we fit and what's our role from both a consumer outreach perspective, but also for my shop, a civil enforcement perspective. We have gained and gathered a lot of information that we plan to use for enforcement efforts, but we need more. We need people feeding us, telling us, where is it that your kids are buying from? File complaints with our office, contact our investigators, contact our lawyers. We want to go after the bad guys, and we need your help in identifying who those people are, how they're approaching children, what tactics they're using, so that we can go back and try and shut that down. And so we appreciate, again, the opportunity to be out here sending that message, and working together, I think we can address and be effective on this issue.
Great. Let's give our panel a round of applause. And I want each of you to be thinking what stood out the most today, what you thought would be something that was easy to convey, or perhaps we can tweak it. We are going to be compiling feedback from you all, compiling highlights from today's summit and from Wednesday's summit, so that way we can mass distribute it. Use social media, use our school systems to distribute information. We are going to work collaboratively and continue with our partners from today, UAMS, Arkansas Children's, as well as the Department of Health and the Department of Education, to make sure that we put this information together. I know that we also have folks from the University of Arkansas Department of Research and Extension, our extension services, to get information out to young people and to adults about these issues. We don't want everyone spinning the same wheels. And so allow us, if you will, to gather this information so that way we can put it together. I have committed the resources from our office to make sure that we are going to get you all some information that will hopefully make a great impact as we move forward to address this problem. Another conversation that I had earlier today, and I want to a special thank you to Justin King, who's the special agent of the Drug Enforcement Administration, is here with us. And as Justin and I were talking, one thing that we are seeing is these pods being used and vapes being used to ingest and to distribute other illegal drugs. It's not only what we've heard about today in these various flavors, but we are beginning to see pods containing fentanyl. And we'll begin seeing pods containing liquid methamphetamine and be able to distribute that among the masses. We're also seeing through law enforcement when our drug dealers travel out of state, say to California, to pick up large shipments of methamphetamine to bring back into Arkansas and to sell on our streets. And cops will tell you, methamphetamine is still our #1 illegal problem in the state. But while those same drug dealers are picking up large quantities of methamphetamine, they're also picking up large quantities in terms of thousands and thousands and 50,000 vape pods at one time to sell. It is a huge economic market for the bad guys. And they're doing that because so many people are addicted. And before long, we're going to see those same 50,000 vape pods being mixed with that incredible amount of methamphetamine, and all of it coming in one package. This is not just about nicotine, which is bad enough. This is about the future of our state and the future of our country. And we don't need to wait to recognize this problem. Now, as I mentioned, I've got a 15-month-old daughter. Well, over the weekend, leading up to it, our nanny had been very excited. She's like, oh, I gave her ravioli. She loves raviolis. And I'm thinking, oh, great. Getting ready to have a house full of raviolis. But she, he sent me this picture of little Juliana, raviolis all over her face, and just having a big time eating them. I was like, okay. Well, that afternoon, I'm driving my mom and my daughter, and we're going up through northeast Arkansas, where I'm from, and I was probably driving a little faster than I should on those curves. Juliana got sick, and I'm thinking, and my mother, who's calm as a cucumber, she's a former special ed teacher, is like, she's getting sick back here. It's really bad. And so I pull over. Really bad, did not even begin to describe the situation in the back of the car. And I had just an extraordinary amount of guilt, as every mom does, thinking, oh my gosh, here I've driven so fast, I've made my child sick, and I never want to do that again. So the next day, I think, okay, we're trying to, we're not going to have a bad day like we had yesterday. So I give her some of those raviolis, because that's what she had liked before. So I want, you want to make your child happy. And about an hour later, I was able to scientifically discern it was not, in fact, my driving that made her sick. Folks, that's the sort of speed with which we need to recognize this problem. It's what's making our children sick and what's making them addictive, and these people who are promoting these products. It took me one day to figure out the problem and how to solve it. It's going to take us longer as a state, but we recognize the problem, and together, let's work to solve it. I want to say a special thank you to my incredible staff at the Attorney General's office. It was just a few short weeks ago. I'd had enough. I had talked to enough school administrators. I had heard from enough legislators. I had talked to enough parents who were beside themselves. I said, we've got to do something. We've got to get everybody at the table and start talking together. And so a special thank you to my team at the Attorney General's office. The points of contact here were Heather McKim and Drew Evans, who led the charge, but it's all of our team that you see around you today, from the lawyers, our IT folks, our public affairs team. Every single person dug in and put this summit together. Last week, we hosted a summit for law enforcement with over 700 attendees. In a couple of weeks, we're going to host a prescription drug summit with about 1,000 attendees. And so for me to show up one day and say, hey, guess what? First week of October, we're doing 2 summits. It's on a brand new subject that we've never done before. Find the experts, find the people that know what they're talking about, because we've got to solve this problem. And it starts today, and it starts with each and every one of you taking this information back and sharing it with the young people in your lives, so Generation Z will be NIC-free. Thank you all for attending today. Remember to go out that door. God bless you all. God bless Arkansas. And as always, God bless the United States of America. Have a great day. Thank you for attending.